Welcome to Reform Thinking. Today, we are looking at a text that deals with a very specific and I'd say very desperate kind of pressure. We're opening up Charles Spurgeon's The Treasury of David again, and we're going to be focusing on his exposition of Psalm 59.
It's a psalm that it was born in a crisis. If you just look at the heading, the historical setting is incredibly tense.
Right.
This isn't David sitting comfortably on a throne, not by a long shot. This is David inside his own house, and the house is completely surrounded.
Right. The context here is connected to 1 Samuel 19. King Saul has sent his men to watch David's house.
Yeah.
They're guarding the exes. They're basically just waiting for the morning so he can kill him. It's a siege.
Precisely. It's a siege against one man. And what makes this deep dive so valuable is that we're looking at how a believer responds when the government itself is the persecutor. When the house is beset by thieves, as Spurgeon puts it, but the thieves have the warrant of the king.
And Spurgeon has this beautiful way of framing the whole situation right at the very start. He notes the paradox of it all.
He does.
How such a terrible situation produced such a beautiful piece of scripture. He says, out of a sour, ungenerous soil spring up the honey-bearing flowers of psalmody.
That's the Reformed perspective on suffering in a nutshell, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, we often think of affliction as something that just gets in the way of our worship.
Sir, interruption.
But Spurgeon argues that affliction is the tuner of the harps. That's his phrase. Without the cruel hunting by Saul, the Church of God would have missed this song. The music of the sanctuary is, it's indebted to the trials of the saints.
So we have this setup. David's trapped. Saul's men are outside. Let's look at the title of the psalm itself, because Spurgeon spends a good bit of time unpacking the significance of the words altasheth and miktigam.
Okay.
Altasheth means destroy not. Is that right?
That's correct. It's a title that you find on a few psalms, and it carries a heavy theological weight. The implication, at least according to Spurgeon, is that whom God preserves, Satan cannot destroy.
It's a statement of divine protection, then.
Yes. But what's fascinating is how God chooses to do that preserving.
It's rarely a lightning bolt from the sky.
No, not at all. Spurgeon points out the providence of God here. He mentions how God preserved Elijah using ravens. Birds that would naturally pick out a man's eyes were used to feed him.
Right.
And here, in David's case, God uses a member of the enemy's own household.
You're talking about Michal, Saul's daughter.
Yes, David's wife, but also the king's daughter. I mean, the irony is just thick here. Saul sends men to kill David, and the escape route is provided by Saul's own flesh and blood. Spurgeon notes that David always found a friend when his case was peculiarly dangerous. It just shows that God's providence often works through the very people or situations that seem to be part of the threat.
And then there's that other word in the title, miktem.
The golden secret. This is the fifth of the golden secrets of David.
Okay.
It suggests that the content of this psalm is a special treasure, something held in high value for God's chosen people. It's not just a complaint, it's a secret key to understanding how to survive when the world turns against you.
Now, before we get into the verses themselves, I noticed Spurgeon takes a bit of a swing at the critics of his day.
Yeah.
Apparently, there were scholars trying to reassign this psalm to a different author or a different time period.
Oh, yeah. Spurgeon had very little patience for that kind of higher criticism. He calls them the would-be intellectuals.
Huh.
There was a fashion then, and there still is, really, to prove one's learning by disagreeing with everyone who came before.
Right.
Spurgeon just argues that the historical heading fits the verses perfectly. When you read about watching the house and the dogs prowling the city, it matches the incident with Saul's men. He basically says we should trust the text rather than the spasms of modern theory.
I appreciate that confidence in the text. So let's dig in. Let's look at the reality of the enemy. Verses 1 and 2 describe the besieged saint. David prays, "Deliver me from mine enemies. Defend me from them that rise up against me."
The first thing to notice is just the inequality of force. It's an armed cordon against one man.
Overwhelming odds.
Completely. Saul has the authority, he has the soldiers. David is being hunted like a bird in a net. But Spurgeon draws a contrast here between the believer and the unbeliever. He mentions the starling that cries, "I cannot get out."
The bird that just panics.
Right. Unbelief says prayer is a waste of breath. Unbelief panics. But David makes prayer his sole resort. He doesn't try to negotiate with the soldiers. He cries to God.
And notice this specific request. He asks to be set on high.
Yeah, that's key.
Like a high tower.
Yes. He wants to be lifted into a position that is simply out of reach of the adversary. It's not just about the enemy going away. It's about David being elevated to a place of spiritual safety where their arrows just cannot reach him.
And he's very clear about the nature of these enemies. He calls them workers of iniquity and bloody men.
He paints them in their true colors. And this isn't just name-calling, it's a theological diagnosis.
Okay.
Spurgeon points out that when a house is beset by thieves, the good man of the house rings the alarm bell. That is what these verses are. The alarm bell ringing, deliver me, save me.
And the reason he appeals to God is because of their nature.
Yes. The bloodthirstiness of the foe. The Lord abhors those who delight in blood.
What really strikes me in verses 3 and 4 is David's insistence on his own innocence. He says, not for my transgression, not for my sin, O Lord.
This is so crucial. This is what Spurgeon calls gratuitous malice.
Gratuitous malice.
David isn't claiming to be sinless before God in a general sense, but in this specific conflict with Saul, he is innocent. He hasn't committed treason. He hasn't tried to kill the king. The enemy is running and preparing for war without fault on David's part.
It seems like that would make it even harder to bear. I mean, if you did something wrong, you might understand the punishment. But it's just irrational hatred.
That is the theological point Spurgeon drives home. The hatred of the wicked against the righteous is often causeless. It's irrational. It stems from that total depravity of the heart that hates goodness simply because it is good. Spurgeon notes that being innocent is a great consolation. It might not win your case in an earthly court, but it is the best argument in the court of conscience and before God.
We absolutely have to talk about the metaphor David uses. It's one of the most vivid images in the entire psalm. He compares his enemies to dogs.
And we need to be really careful not to read this with our, 21st century Western eyes. Spurgeon and the sources he quotes make it crystal clear that we are not talking about the family golden retriever.
Right. These are not house pets.
No. In the East, and specifically in the context of ancient cities, dogs were scavengers. They were unowned, loathsome, degraded creatures. They were lean, hungry, and they hunted in packs.
Spurgeon quotes a traveler, a man named Albert Smith, who described the dogs in Constantinople.
That was a striking detail. Smith described the noise of 60,000 dogs in the city. 60,000. He called it a continuous, uniform riot.
A riot.
Yelping, howling, barking, growling. That is the soundscape of this song. David is inside his house, and outside is this pack of human dogs, howling, prowling, snapping at one another, waiting for blood.
It is a genuinely terrifying image, and David extends it to their speech as well. Verse 7 says, behold, they belch out with their mouth.
Belch out. I mean, it's a disgusting image, and it's intentionally so. It suggests a fountain of malice that just bubbles over. They can't contain it. Spurgeon says their vocabulary of abuse is copious. Swords are in their lips. Their words are designed to cut and to kill.
And what's the root of this behavior? Why do they act like this?
It's because of their practical atheism. They ask, who doth hear? They assume that God is not listening or that he doesn't care. They believe the government on earth, Saul's government, is the only authority that matters. When men think they are unaccountable to heaven, they become capable of the most atrocious cruelty.
So you have this pack of howling dogs, completely confident that no one is listening. But then, in verse 5, David calls on God to awake.
And he appeals to two very specific titles of God: Lord God of hosts and God of Israel.
Why those two specifically?
Well, Lord God of hosts refers to his sovereignty over all the armies of heaven, the stars, the angels. It's a reminder of his absolute strength.
Okay.
And God of Israel refers to the covenant. It's a reminder of his relationship to his people. So David is basically saying, you have the strength and you have the promise.
And he asks God to visit all the heathen. But there's a distinction Spurgeon makes here regarding mercy.
Yes, and this requires some careful thought. David prays, be not merciful to any wicked transgressors. Now, Spurgeon clarifies that we can pray for God to be merciful to them as men.
To save their souls.
To save their souls, yes. But we cannot ask God to be merciful to them as transgressors if they remain hardened in their sin. If they continue to be oppressors, justice must be dealt.
I see.
To wink at the sin of the persecutor is to leave the righteous under their tyranny.
And then comes the response from heaven, verse 8. But thou, O Lord, shalt laugh at them.
We saw the dogs howling. Now we see God laughing. It's such a stark contrast. The plots of the mighty, even a king like Saul, are utterly ridiculous to the Almighty.
It completely changes the perspective.
It does. If God is laughing at the enemy, why should the church tremble? Spurgeon says the greatest, cleverest, most malicious enemies of the church are only objects of ridicule to the Lord. His high tower is so far above them that all their jumping and barking means nothing.
Moving into section 4 of our outline, we hit a concept that I think a lot of modern listeners might misunderstand just because of the language. We're talking about preventing mercy.
This is one of the most significant theological veins in the entire psalm. Verse 10 says, "The God of my mercy shall prevent me."
Now, in modern English, prevent means to stop something from happening. But that's not what it means here at all.
No, we have to look at the archaic, or really the Latin root of the word prevenire, to go before, to precede. So David is saying, "The God of my mercy shall go before me."
So God is beforehand with his people.
That's it. Spurgeon notes that the supply is prepared before the need occurs. The refuge is built before the danger arises. Before Saul ever sent those men, God had already arranged for Michal to be there. God had already arranged the means of escape.
So it's the idea that God is never just reacting to a situation. He has already been there.
He is never caught off guard. And notice the personal pronoun David uses, "the God of my mercy."
Spurgeon loves that "my."
Oh, he does. He says there is a portion of mercy laid by in God's eternal counsel specifically for you. It's held in trust. It's not just some general mercy for the world. It is specific, tailored mercy for the individual believer. It's the Father of mercies taking care of his child.
And because of this preventing mercy, this mercy that goes before, David says he will see his desire upon his enemies.
Now, Spurgeon offers a small but important correction there. The words "my desire" are not actually in the original Hebrew. It really means he will look upon his enemies.
What does that imply? What's the difference?
It implies looking without fear. It implies a calm gaze. Spurgeon compares it to Stephen in the New Testament, looking at his accusers with the face of an angel.
Oh, wow.
When you know the God of your mercy has gone before you, you can look the enemy in the eye without flinching. You can see them as already defeated, even while they're still howling.
That brings us to a very counterintuitive prayer in verse 11. David says, "Slay them not."
It just stops you in your tracks, doesn't it? He just asked for deliverance. Now he's saying, don't kill them.
So why? Why would he ask God not to destroy the enemies immediately?
The reason is given explicitly, lest my people forget.
Forget what?
Forget the lesson. Forget the justice of God. Spurgeon argues that a sudden destruction ends the lesson too quickly. Dead enemies are soon forgotten.
But living enemies.
Living enemies who are scattered and brought down by God's strength, they serve as living monuments.
They become a warning sign.
Exactly. Spurgeon uses this brilliant illustration from history. He talks about the Spartans. Apparently, there was a neighboring city that was hostile to Sparta, and some wanted to just destroy it completely. But the Spartans refused. They said, "Destroy not the whetstone of our young men."
The whetstone. The sharpening stone.
The enemy kept the Spartans sharp. It kept them watchful. Spurgeon applies this to the church. He says a lively, vexatious devil is often less to be dreaded than a sleepy, forgetful spirit.
So the enemies keep the Christian awake.
They do. They drive us to prayer. If all our problems vanish instantly, we might just become spiritually lazy.
That is a hard truth to swallow, but it makes perfect sense of the text. He asks God to scatter them and bring them down.
He wants them stripped of their authority and their influence, wandering like Cain. He wants them to be advertisements of God's truth.
But eventually, in verse 13, he does pray, "Consume them."
Yes, there is a timing to it. After they have served their purpose as a whetstone, after they have been a warning, then justice must be final. Consume them in wrath, that they may not be.
And the goal of this consumption.
That it may be known to the ends of the earth that God ruleth in Jacob. It is always, always about the glory of God. Spurgeon lists historical examples, the overthrow of Napoleon, the death of Tom Paine, the siege of Paris. He views these things as sermons. When a great tyrant falls, or a loud atheist is silenced, it's a lesson to the whole world that God is still on the throne.
It's a demonstration of sovereignty.
It is. God uses them while they are useful for his purposes, and he removes them when his justice demands it.
Let's move to the final section then. The contrast between the morning and the evening. We talked about the dogs howling in the evening.
Yes, verses 14 and 15 describe the wicked returning at evening. They growl and they grudge if they be not satisfied.
That word grudge is so interesting.
It conveys this deep, bitter dissatisfaction. Spurgeon paints a picture of the misery of the ungodly. They have these large appetites, but no satisfaction. They're like those dogs prowling the city, finding nothing and just growling about it.
Spurgeon calls it The hell of the wicked.
He does. He describes it as an ambitious camp of rebels espousing a hopeless cause, driven by raging passions. I mean, think about the psychology of Saul's men.
Yeah.
They're pacing around, they're angry, they're hungry for blood, and they're frustrated that they can't catch this one man. They are miserable. Sin is just miserable work.
And the great irony is, while they're prowling and thinking they're going to catch him in the morning, David is already safe.
He's gone. He's out of their reach. All their labor is in vain.
And then comes the big but, verse 16. But I will sing.
The great antithesis. They howl, I sing, they are stuck in the evening. I'm looking to the morning.
I will sing aloud of thy mercy in the morning.
The morning implies the dawn of deliverance. The night of the siege doesn't last forever. And notice the content of the song. He sings of two things, strength and mercy.
Okay, why those two specifically?
Spurgeon says, strength and mercy must be joined. Strength means he can defend you. Mercy means he will defend you.
I see.
If God had all the strength in the world but no mercy, we would be terrified of him. If he had mercy but no strength, he couldn't help us. But David sings of both. Unto thee, O my strength, will I sing.
Spurgeon has a lovely insight here about the exclusivity of this song.
He says there is not even a stray note for man. David doesn't sing about his own cleverness in escaping. He doesn't sing about Michal's quick thinking. He sings to God. For God is my defense.
It is just total dependence.
It is. Spurgeon says, sweet is the music of experience, but it is all for God. The believer who has been through the siege, who has heard the dogs howling, sings a song that is pure and focused entirely on the God of his mercy.
So to recap, we've walked through the siege, the dogs, the high tower, the preventing mercy, and now the morning song.
It's a remarkable song, a complete journey.
Okay, let's try and summarize what we've learned from this deep dive into Psalm 59.
Well, we started with that sour soil of persecution, and we learned that God uses these difficult times, these sieges, to produce the honey of psalmody.
Right.
We learned that God protects his people, sometimes using the most unexpected means, like the daughter of the enemy.
And we saw the reality of the enemy, that irrational dog-like hatred of the world against the righteous.
And we saw the sovereign response. God isn't panicked by it. He is laughing. He is the high tower. And perhaps one of the biggest takeaways is preventing mercy. The God who goes before us, the God who has the escape route ready before the danger even knocks on the door.
And we touched on that difficult concept of the whetstone, that God sometimes allows enemies to remain for a season to keep us sharp, to serve as living warnings before he deals with them in his justice.
And finally, the contrast. The dissatisfaction of sin versus the morning song of the believer. The wicked grudge and growl. The righteous sing of strength and mercy.
It really forces you to check your own reaction to trouble, doesn't it?
It does, and that leads to a provocative thought I'd like to leave our listeners with. We all hear the howling of the world. It might not be armed men around our house, but it might be cultural pressure, slander, or just the general noise of a society that hates God.
Sure.
The question is, are we allowing that howling to disturb our rest?
Or are we waiting for the morning?
That's the question. And to take it a step further, think about the whetstones in your own life. That person, that situation, that difficulty that just will not go away. Instead of just praying, remove it, remove it, remove it, perhaps we should be asking, how is God using this to sharpen me? How is this keeping me awake?
That changes the prayer entirely.
It does. It moves us from panic to purpose. We can look at the dogs and say, you can howl all you want. God is my high tower. He has already been here. He has prevented me with mercy.
And when the morning comes, we will have a song to sing.
A song of strength and mercy.
Thank you for joining us on this dive into Psalm 59. It is a good reminder that no matter who is watching the house, God is watching over us.
Amen to that.
We'll see you next time on Reformed Thinking.